Hello, I'm Angela Sanchez, and I am so many things. So the most important one, I am a mother, I am a wife, I am a sister, a daughter. And on top of all of that, I am an engineer, an entrepreneur, and a speaker. Okay, I grew up in Bogota, Colombia. And I think I had a very special upbringing. I am the oldest of 3 kids, and I come from a very proper, formal family. And I grew up with a lot of values and a lot of principles that made me who I am. Grew up in an apartment building in Bogota, on the north side of the cities where most of the buildings are. So we used to have like a doorman, and I used to play in Colombia. The garages are underneath. So I used to play during the day in the garages with my bike and everything. I was not really allowed to go outside that much to bike or anything like that, or just play with my friends in the other apartments. Growing up in Bogota, Colombia was a special experience. I went to only girls' school, and I grew up there in the 80s and 90s. And unfortunately, those years were very tough for Colombia due to all the drugs and narco traffic happening at the time. So growing up was a little bit scary in a way, because it was kind of dangerous, just to be honest. I'm very lucky and very blessed that I was never really close to any of bad situations or in danger directly. There were like car bombings, even in Bogota, but I was never like on that part of the city. So I was very blessed that I didn't have to really, I was not affected directly in that way, but I was very affected directly seeing and living what was happening in my country during those years. And obviously, some of my friends got affected by that.
What did mom and dad do?
So, well, I come from an entrepreneurial family. My parents are serial entrepreneurs, and their most successful company was in construction. They used to do all the rebar for building constructions, for building, and they always brought me there since I was little to help them working. So all my vacation time, all my breaks, everything was with them, learning about the business.
So growing up, I mean, mom and dad must have worked so hard raising three children. So what kind of values were they installing? What did they used to tell you? Like, you're going to school so you can become what?
Well, there are like 2 different things that they gave me. One was all the principles and values as a human being, right? And then when I finished high school, because my parents had a construction company at the time, they gave me 3 options. So in that part, I'm not very happy, but I'm gonna say it. They gave me 3 options to go to college. Basically, they said civil engineering, industrial engineering, or business, actually. Those were the 3 options that they wanted me to study. So at the time, they didn't give me kind of the freedom for me to pick what I wanted to do. And I wanted to be, I wanted to go to school for psychologists, to become a psychologist. So that didn't happen. But at the end of the day, I ended up studying civil engineering because I was gonna continue with my parents' business, right, in construction. But what happened was that when I was in my last year of college, because of the narco traffic problem that we had in Colombia, they started doing a lot of money laundering through construction. And then my parents couldn't compete anymore because obviously the pricing couldn't compete with others that were doing money laundering. So they unfortunately had to close their business, and I never had the opportunity to work with them.
So you went to university, you were studying civil engineering.
Yes.
All right, things were going great. Then you meet the love of your life.
I met him before.
Oh, so tell me, sorry, I speed up your process, so pardon me.
Actually, I met my husband, well, we've known each other since we were born. So it's a funny story in that way too, because my dad and his mom were neighbors. So they grew up together, my dad and Jaime's mom. And they partied together and all of that, and then they each, found their spouses and they got married, and then they visited each other as friends. And actually, Jaime's mom used to own a salon, like a hair salon, and my parents used to take me there for her to do my hair and all of that. And that's when I used to see Jaime, but we were not like friends with Jaime, anyway, so we kind of grew up knowing each other, but not really hanging out until I was finishing high school, and he was already in engineering school. He was in the best university in Bogota, and he was failing, and he needed to bring his grades up, and he was studying systems engineering, computer science. And they needed a computer. And at the time, it's not like today that everybody has computers or had computers. So my parents, obviously in their company, they had computers. So his mom called my dad and asked if Jaime could use my dad's computers at his office for Jaime to do this project. So my dad, being my dad, was like, sure, come and have dinner with us first, and then we go to the office. So they came, and I was finishing high school. I was in my last year of high school. And I was avoiding him. I was like serving dinner, like how can I, being in the kitchen, not being close to him. But my parents made me sit right next to him. And then we had the most amazing conversation. And we became good friends. So since that day, he kept going to my parents' office, but then he stopped by first by my house just to talk to me, and then moved to work. And that's how we dated for 7 years. So we've been together since 1990, for almost 33 years.
Tell me what happened that both of you decided to come to the United States.
Yeah. We were married, and we both wanted we are both engineers. I'm a civil engineer, he's a systems engineer. We both wanted to round out our skills and study business, get our MBA. And we decided to study in a university in Bogota. And the day before we had to pay the tuition, my husband came home and he said, we are studying overseas. And obviously you don't know my husband, but he's a very funny guy. So I thought he was joking, because he jokes all the time, and he was not joking, he was very serious. And I was like, where are we gonna go? We don't speak English. We will have to go to, any country in Latin America or Spain. And I didn't take him that seriously that night, but then the next day he continued being serious about it. So then we didn't pay tuition, and then we started looking for options, and we picked Spain, and we applied for Instituto de Empresa in Madrid, Spain. And he got accepted, and so we were going to Spain, but now we needed to save more money to go to Spain, so we decided to wait 1 more year and then go to Spain. So a year passed. The thing is, even though the program was in Spain, it was the international MBA. So the program was in English anyway. So we decided we needed to study English. And Jaime's sister was living in New York City at the time. And she told us, why don't you come here, learn English, and then go to Spain? And so that's why we were like, okay, so Jaime made me quit. Like, we quit our jobs the next Monday, and we packed everything. We didn't sell anything. We were renting the apartment, so we left the apartment, left everything at my in-laws' house, because we were gonna come back to Colombia 2 years later. And so we left to New York City to learn English. And after 6 months learning English there, we didn't feel comfortable enough to take a class in English. So we decided to stay another 6 months. And after a year of living in New York, paying like full-time English classes, we didn't have enough savings to move to Spain. And we didn't want to move back to Colombia without the master's. And at the time, one of my friends from college was living in Manchester, New Hampshire. So she suggested us to try Southern New Hampshire University for our master's. And Jaime applied, and he got, like, classes started like the following week. So he applied, he got accepted, and then we moved to Manchester, New Hampshire. And I started looking for a job in engineering. And after a month, I got a job. And with my English, that was broken English still, even though we had been studying English for a year. And so I got a job in the Big Dig, which was a huge project here in Boston. And then Jaime continued. He got his master's, and I got a job here. And I always say that life brought us here. We never intended to live in this country. We were going to Europe and then go back home, and it never happened. We never went back, and we stayed here. Yeah.
At that time, were you guys working? I mean, how was life?
No, at that time we couldn't work because when we were in New York City, we had a student visa. So when you come to this country with a student visa, you cannot work. You come here just to study. So that's why we run out of savings, because we were spending in dollars and we couldn't really get income. We were just studying. And we didn't know if we could really stay here. We didn't want to be illegal here. We always went with the book. We wanted to follow all the rules and respect the culture, right? So when the opportunity presented for Jaime to come to Manchester, New Hampshire and continue being a student, then I became like a spouse of a student. So that's a visa that you can have. But for me, in order to be able to work here, I needed to find a sponsor, a company that wanted to sponsor me with the work visa. So that's another process that takes a while. And I was very lucky that at the time the Big Dig was happening in Boston, and they were looking for civil engineers. I mean, it's construction. So they were short of people in construction, and they were looking for engineers. So it was perfect because this company called me. So I started sending my resume that I wish I can see it now, because with my broken English, I didn't know any word, any technical word in English. So to put a resume together without technical words, in engineering, it was very hard for me. And at the time, there was not Google or anything. So I was going with Jaime's, we bought a $500 car, because in Manchester, New Hampshire, you need a car to go to school. And I would go with him and be in the library, and I was just with a Spanish-English dictionary trying to put my resume together. But anyway, I sent it out. I got a call pretty quickly, I would say, from a company in Boston. And they did a phone interview. That when you are learning a new language, having a phone interview is not fun. And because a lot of the way you communicate is through your body, and especially me, as you can tell. And
you come from a very expressive culture,
yes,
right?
exactly. So, like on the phone, it doesn't work. But anyway, I had the opportunity to go for a second round and visit the office. And I had an opportunity I had two guys to interview me. And one of them was very open, very nice. The other one was a lot more close. I think he didn't like me that much. But anyway, after the interview, they told me in 2 weeks they would make a decision if I would be, hired or not. So I waited for those 2 weeks and nothing happened. And so I knew I had not gotten the position. But that nice guy was the only civil engineer that I knew in this country, right? So I'm like, I need to talk to him. He needs to help me put my resume together because I don't know how to say so many words. So I called him and I said, look, I know I know I didn't get the job, but I would love if you could help me put my resume together. So I called this guy and I asked for help, and he changed my whole resume. He changed everything because I shared with him my experience in my broken English, and 2 days later he hired me. 2 days later he gave me a position as an estimator. He was the construction VP at the time. So then I started as an estimator, and it was perfect because that's where you do like a lot of measurements. An estimator in construction is where you find, quantities and work with the blueprints, and you don't need to talk that much. It's just measuring, so measures and numbers are universal. And that's how I started, and that's how I learned a lot of technical vocabulary in my profession. They sponsored me. They did my whole visa, and it took 10 years for me to get the green card. It was a long process. I mean, I got the work visa pretty quickly, but then I had to stay in my work visa to apply for the green card for the residents, and we applied right after September 11.
So you're working on to get your green card as well, but at least you have a job, so income is coming in.
Yeah.
What about your husband? In the meantime, could you talk to us then? Were you guys thinking of starting a family? What was happening?
Yeah. So at the time, I found this job that he was studying, right? So he was still a student. He still had a student visa, so he couldn't work. We needed to establish ourselves here. We had 2 luggages, right? That's all we had. We moved with my friend, the one who suggested to move to Manchester. She gave us a place in her place, and then I started working. There was those days were tough in a sense that as an immigrant having a work visa, you don't have access to student loans, for instance, right? Because you are not a resident or a citizen. So I had to pay Jaime's school, and he was studying. So from my very low salary at the time, like entry-level engineering salary at the time, I had to pay full, like his tuition in full, so he could continue. So we were so grateful to being able to work here and to have this opportunity that we never really saw it as a negative thing or as a problem, really. But then once he graduated, he got a job, and he got a sponsorship also from his company. So now he started making money, and we were now like establishing ourselves here. And we decided that we were already in our 30s, and we wanted to start a family. And that's when we had another exciting ride experience, like a roller coaster experience, I should say, because first of all, at the beginning, Jaime was in consulting, so he used to travel a lot, so it was not that easy to get pregnant. And then we were really serious about trying to get pregnant, and we couldn't get pregnant. We didn't get pregnant. It took us years trying ourselves, I would say maybe 2 or 3 years, and we couldn't get pregnant. So then we decided to go to the doctor and see if something was wrong with him or with me. And they ran all the tests. Some of them were not fun, to see if I personally had a problem. They couldn't find anything wrong with me or anything that was not working with my body. They tested Jaime, my husband, and he was normal as well. So there was not really, they couldn't find any problem. And I remember sometimes having conversations with Jaime, like, we wish they find something, at least they can work on that, right? Like, at least they can find a treatment or something so we could get pregnant. We couldn't, and I would say it was like maybe 4 years now, and so we are Catholics, right, in Colombia, so that's bringing another layer into the whole situation. Our religion, we are Catholics, and Catholicism don't allow you to do like these fertility treatments, right? Like, you know, kids come from God, and so it was like a dilemma inside me, like, should I go for an infertility treatment or not? I don't know, you know, my religion, you know, doesn't allow it really. So it was an internal fight of should we do it or not? At the end, we decided to go for it, and that fertility treatment starts like with, you know, you cannot just start with IVF. IVF is the last part of the process. So you start with artificial inseminations, and obviously they have to prepare my body to be ready for that. And they basically managed my whole body, like with hormones and pills and all of that. So I always say that my husband is a saint because my moods were up and down all the time. And we went through almost a year of treatment unsuccessfully. We didn't get pregnant at all until we got to the IVF process. And that is a little bit more intense because it's with injections, and it has to be, I remember the injections had to be at a particular time every day. So it doesn't matter where you are, you have to get injection. And I couldn't do it myself. Like I know a lot of women, and I admire them that they can, you know, inject themselves. I couldn't. I tried and I couldn't. So Jaime had to be with me all the time. He was the one who gave me the injections in this little fat thing that we have here in my belly, and then that's when your mood really goes up and down. Your hormones, you know, they are strong. I was 34 at the time, but we were very, very positive, like we really wanted this baby and we were really going for it. And so the first cycle happened, and I remember they got like, I don't remember, like maybe 20, 22 eggs, what they call eggs. And then they combine them and they become, with Jaime's sperm, and they become embryos, right? And then they check them and see how many of them survived. And only 2 out of all of those really survived and grew. I would say grew. And so those were the 2 that were transferred to me. And that's when you have to then wait. But then, so while you wait, so they transfer those to you, and then you have to wait, like a normal pregnancy, like 2 weeks to see if you are pregnant. But in the meantime, when you get pregnant naturally, the body already knows that you are pregnant, so the body produces progesterone. But this time, because it's all like kind of, I would say artificial in a way, we call them like handmade kids. They are, so they have to inject you progesterone during that waiting time. And that is a needle that is actually in your bottom. And it's huge. So they teach you like these classes for Jaime on how to do it, and anyway. And I remember the first time he didn't want to hurt me, so he was going like so slow and I'm like, no, go, like quick, like go for it. So then it was like so many funny stories, but it was not funny at the time. So the next day he would like just go fast, because they were painful when you go very slow trying to get a needle inside your body. It's so funny. But anyway, so you are very excited about, being pregnant, and it didn't work. Like they called us and they were like, no, the results are negative and you are not pregnant. So you have to go for another cycle. So they have to again put like my body in zeros. So you have to wait another month until your body kind of stabilizes and then restart again. With the injections and all of that. And we are very lucky in the sense that time, again, we got only 2 embryos. They transferred 2 embryos and we got pregnant with 1, which is, who is our teenager now. And so we got pregnant with Bella at the time. So we were very thrilled. I didn't have any issues with pregnancy, because that was the other thing. I don't know if I will be able to carry the baby, because we didn't know, since the doctors never found out what the problem was. I didn't know, also if my body was going to have a problem carrying a baby. But thank God everything went fine, and she was healthy, and we had I had a very good pregnancy. It was a very easy pregnancy. And if you ask my husband, I had a very easy labor because according to him, I made it look very easy. And I remember he would tell all his friends like, oh, it was very easy. Like it was easy. And then, so I was like, oh, really? It's very easy? So when I complained to him, he was like, sorry. So a lot of couples, they go through the treatment the first time they have the baby, and then they are able to get pregnant by themselves the second time. So we said, okay, hopefully that's the case for us. And we tried, and again, didn't work. So we waited 3 years, and it didn't work. So we decided to go back to the treatment, and because we had already gone through the treatment, now the insurance would cover. Now we could go through IVF directly because insurance would cover that directly. So, and that's another thing. We were very lucky that we were in Massachusetts, because at the time, I'm not sure now, but at the time, only 2 states out of the 50 states in the United States covered the infertility treatments. And Massachusetts was one of those 2. So we were very lucky in that way too. This time I was 39, and I was, because of my age, they had to stimulate my body more, even more, so the hormones were stronger. And I remember the injection, like I remember my stomach area got bruises and everything from the injections that I never got when I was, like 4 years earlier. So it was a lot more, it was tougher on my body physically and emotionally too, because of the hormones. Again, it was a roller coaster. So we went straight to IVF. They extracted my eggs, and they got 4 embryos this time. So they were able to freeze 2 embryos, and then they transfer to what they call fresh embryos. And it didn't work. And I remember telling Jaime, this time was so tough for me that I don't think I can do it again. And the doctor recommended us to go for another fresh cycle because the probabilities of getting pregnant were higher. And I told Jaime, I don't think that I can do it again. So we decided to give it a try with the frozen embryos. And the doctors were like, well, you are almost 40, the probabilities are less. I think it was like 10% probabilities with frozen embryos. Anyway, we said, like, let's try and see what happens. And we were very lucky because both of them actually took, and now we have twins. We have twin girls now. They are almost 11.
So you got your family.
Yes.
You're working.
Yes.
Things starting to turn around. Do you start to feel more like home? You're making money, or not yet?
Oh yes, I was already, all of this time I was working in engineering. I ended up getting my MBA when my first daughter was 1 year old. Because remember, we everything was because of the MBA, right? We left Colombia because of the MBA, and my husband was able to go for his master's when we moved to Manchester, but I didn't. So I just worked, and then when Bella was born, she was 1, I decided to go back to school, to graduate school to get my MBA. So Jaime was a huge supporter. He took care of Bella a lot, and I was working and doing my MBA at the time, but we were a lot more established here and more happy here. And now I guess the challenge for us is not, I mean, yes, we have our careers are established, and now the challenge is how we raise, how you can raise kids in a kind of in a multicultural environment, if you want to call it like that, because we grew up in Colombia in a certain way, right? And then we are here in a country that we are still getting to know, and we don't know anything about kids in this culture. So learning from, like the cares, how they work, all these rules that we didn't even know them in Colombia, right? Because we didn't have kids there. So it's all this learning experience on having kids in this country and raising them or educate them with our values and our principles, but at the same time living in this culture. So it's been interesting because what we want to do is take the good things of our Latino culture and the good things of the I don't want to say American, but the American culture. I don't want to say American because we always tease the girls, and this is one of the things, is that we in Colombia, we are Americans too because we are in the American continent.
United States culture.
Exactly, the United States culture.
And the English culture.
So you know how Isabella came out with this term, it's called the USAers culture.
USAers culture.
So every time that I want to say USAers, but I wanted to clarify why. It's called the USAers culture. In Colombia, the main meal is lunch. And lunch is when we eat like the rice and the chicken and the beef and the salad and all of that. And at night is a little bit more on a lighter side, or at least in my family, that's how it was. Breakfast is breakfast. But here, I discovered that here lunch is like a quick sandwich, but then dinner is like the bigger meal. So sending Isabella when she started in kindergarten, so I would make her lunch, and I bought this special lunch bag that would keep her lunch warm, right? Because they don't warm lunches at the school. So it was different for her. And she would come and she would say like, Mom, but all my friends have like grapes and melon and all of that, or peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And I'm like, yeah, pretty, but we don't eat that kind of food, right? So, but she was good. I mean, she would just wonder, but she was good. It came to 4th grade, where she was obviously more of a person, and I was less of an influencer on her. She started coming home with her lunch bag like full, like she didn't even open it. And she started, so I would ask her like what happened, and she would tell me, oh, it was like this event at lunchtime, I didn't have time to have lunch, or I was talking too much and I didn't have time to have lunch, and all of these stories, until one day she confessed that she felt very uncomfortable because her food looked very different from the rest of her friends. So, and her personality also is one of that she doesn't like to get attention. So when she would open her lunch box, people would come and check what she was bringing, right? Because I love cooking, so it was like a very specialized lunch and everything. And people would come as a curiosity, I guess, or the kids, to see what she was getting. So she felt very uncomfortable. So that was one of the first things that we had kind of crashed on cultures, because I didn't want to make a sandwich for my daughter for lunch, and she didn't feel comfortable eating the food that I was making for her. So we had to come into a compromise, right? Like, okay, how are we gonna manage this situation, and how we could work together on that. So we decided like some days she would have lunch at the school, and some days she would bring lunch from home. And that's how we kind of committed to mix both sides of the differences in cultures. Another thing that I can share is, at the beginning, when they were growing with us, like we spoke Spanish to them at home, right? So Bella was fluent in Spanish, and then when the twins started talking, they started communicating among them in English, but they knew Spanish was the way to communicate with us. But there was a point where they would only speak in English, and they understand everything in Spanish, but they don't speak back to us in English. In Spanish, I'm sorry, they always do it in English. So at the beginning, they had no issues with our accent, but now it is funny because obviously they now tell us that our English is not good, and they also tell us that our pronunciation is embarrassing with some words. So we just laugh. I mean, we make this as a funny, laughable. I don't even know if that's lovable experience, because I don't know if I should say these words, but it's like when I was teaching the twins to go to the bathroom, it's potty training, right? Like I was potty training the twins, so I would tell them like, we are gonna go through our potty training process and all of that. Well, it seems that the way that I pronounce party and party, like fiesta, like dancing and all of that, is very similar. So they started like making fun of us that it's party, and I still don't know if I'm pronouncing it well or not. But there are so many things so many words that we pronounce that now we are not allowed to say here, because the way we pronounce it is not the correct way. So, and some of them that actually sound like a bad word. Like I'm gonna give you an example, like Excel spreadsheet. Like I said, and I'm sorry if I'm saying it in a wrong way, but I said shit, but it seems that sometimes it just sounds like the bad word. So I don't know. I really don't know. Like
Excel sheet,
and but they said they sound like, I don't even know, because I said shit and they just laugh. I don't know what I don't know how they sounded. Oh, yes, that's beach. Another. That's
I can say bitch.
Yes, that's another word that is there. Like I'm like, let's go to the beach, and they're like, Mom, don't say that word, and I'm like, but I'm saying beach, and they're like, no. And so yeah, so we have like cried out of tears out of laughing, because they tell us, they teach us, but I cannot put my mouth in the way they are doing it.
So, was there a point in your life where you navigated away from construction? You were home. Mm-hmm. Could you talk about that?
Yes, I did. So something that I found difficult, but not only here, I'm assuming in the rest of the world, working in construction is not a very it's a very male-oriented industry, and is not as flexible as other industries. So when I had Isabella and I had my MBA, I went for my MBA. I was super pregnant, and I was with a hard hat and boots in the job site. I had no problems with that. I've always been very proud of being an engineer. But when I became a mother, it became a lot more challenging, because even to take her to the doctor became an issue sometimes. Like they would say, like, don't you have anybody else to take her to the doctor? Or, oh, is she sick again? Or, it became very challenging, because the industry per se is a very old school industry. So I remember most of the wives of my co-workers, because most of my co-workers were men. I would say I was the only female engineer at the time. So all of them, their wives were home, so they really never had to deal with taking the kids to the doctor or the activities. It was not a big issue for them if a kid was sick for 2 or 3 days, because their wives were there. But for me, I am the mother, and I wanted to take my daughter to the doctor, and it's my daughter. So it became a little bit challenging. So when I finished my MBA and I went to Babson, that is a very entrepreneurial school, I wanted to start a business, and kind of got I told you I got the bug of the entrepreneurship from my parents. During all my career and everything, I always wore this jewelry from Colombia, and people really admired it here, but I never thought about doing anything in the jewelry world or in the fashion world because I was always in construction. I was not really involved in that industry until one trip to Colombia where I was talking to one of the artisans that made the jewelry that I was wearing, and she told me her story.
I'm very excited about today. We are going to go and visit Catherine in Suba, and she is going to explain us the whole orange peel process. I'm very excited about it.
I thought how I can be that bridge and how I can be of help. And I started a jewelry business that supports women artisans from Colombia, and that's how the whole idea started. And the best of all of that, I mean, I think that's the best. But another good thing is that all the materials that we use are natural, are organic, so they all come from seeds and orange peels and all of that. So I started that company, and that's still running. COVID hit us a little bit hard. I think we are starting to pick up again more accounts and all of that. But yeah, I left construction for a while.
Was quitting ever an option?
It is that question is very interesting because I never thought of quitting. Like, quit of what? Like, like that's life. That's the path. That's becoming, right? It's like you are always constantly becoming and evolving, right? So nothing really. I never saw anything as an it's an obstacle now. I'm gonna do like I'm just not gonna do it or anything. I just thought that's part of life. That's what life is giving me right now. I'm just live it and experience that, right? I always, when I had my tech talk, people ask me about the joy, right? And I feel like the joy, we live it every day. Joy is not, in my opinion, is not an end. It's not a goal. Like, we live with joy every day, but it's your decision to live your life with joy. We were able, remember we were students, so we couldn't work, we couldn't afford anything. And then we moved to Manchester for Jaime to study his master's. In that transition, we were living with my friend, but then she got a job in Boston, so she moved to Boston. She moved with all her stuff. So we had none, like a mattress. We had none, a table, like we had nothing. Not a pan to cook in. I think she left maybe a pan or something. I mean, we were sleeping on the floor. So we didn't like sit down and cry and say like, this is the end of the day. We were like, okay, we are happy that we are here. We are studying now here. I'm gonna start looking for a job. And we enjoyed eating on the floor. So it's how you see things. A lot of people, or some people who make the choice not to see things in a positive way probably would be devastated. But it's your choice to see things in a positive way or in a negative way, even though the situation is the same. So I never thought of quitting. Like, to me, that's not quitting, that's life. Like, I quit, it's like quit life, it's like died, really.
Looking back, what do you attribute your tenacity to?
I don't know, really. I just go and do things, and I just don't give up easily. I just, like, these things need to be done. I'm not gonna say that I don't feel sad sometimes. I'm not gonna say that I don't feel frustrated sometimes. But what I understand is that it's part of the process. So what I understand is that I need this problem in order for me to know what is the solution that I need to find, or that there is a solution, or that this is not what I want. And so I move to a different point.
One more question.
Yes.
Was there any time in your life where even your optimism felt like too little, too late, or this is just not gonna do it. Did you ever, there's any moment in your life that you felt like maybe this is it, this is the end, I can't see a way past this, but then voila.
Okay. So I'm gonna give you two answers. One is actually, right now, I am with the construction business. Because entrepreneurship, a lot of people think like is all great. This goes from here and it's just a straight line up there, right? But it's not. It's like this, right? It's a roller coaster. With the construction business, right now I am in the point where I'm like, is this my path? Is this my path? And something that already passed, that what I was telling you, that we were eating on the floor. At the time, we had student visas. We couldn't get a job. I mean, we were not allowed to work because of the visa, right? We were not. We didn't have a work visa. We had a student visa. There was one day that we had, like, I would say maybe $20 with us, and I said, we don't even have money to go back to Colombia, to buy a ticket to go back to Colombia. What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? And the next day, I remember Jaime started tutoring in this, because that was the only thing that you can do as a student. You could have up to 20 hours that you could tutor other students. So he signed for that, and he had done some tutoring sessions. So I remember the next day we got a check for $200. And that day I thought, like, everything is always gonna be okay. Everything always is gonna be okay. And that's something that passed, and we were never in that situation again.
All right, as we wrap up your interview, Angela, what is something that I've not asked that you'd like to say?
Something that you have not asked that I would like to say. You have gotten all my life already. Yeah, I guess what I would say is how in my last 2 years I feel I have grown spiritually, not to confuse with religion, but from a human point of view and a soul point of view. Like, in the last 2 years, I have realized that we are a lot more than this body. Or I mean, I always knew because of my religion in a way, but I think I have found a different meaning, or a deeper meaning on what we are as human beings here in this world, and what we are supposed to do here, and how we can help each other here, how we are all one, and seeing the division that there is in the world, and seeing all of those things is how I can be. I know I cannot fix everything, but how I can be that little positive piece of sand that could create a positive impact of the world that is around me.